All right, folks, we're going to get started here. Please find your table as we welcome you to our 5th annual Welcome House Breakfast. I want you to give it up for yourselves. We have a record crowd today. How about it? Good morning, yeah. It's my pleasure to be back as your MC, my 5th year here at this fabulous event. My name is John Holt. Let me be perfectly clear. I have nothing to do with this April weather. If anybody has a tea time today, talk to the meteorologists. I'm in charge of fake news. That's what I do. You know, I tell people, I'm half joking, it's not fake news because I can't make this stuff up, you know? It's ridiculous. But it's fun, and it's job security. We are thrilled to be back again with, look at this crowd. We started 5 years ago. Where's Grant? We started 5 years ago, we were talking about this before, at the Ritz Charles, a couple of years there in a nice room with a nice crowd, and look what we've become today as you support the Welcome House program. Thank you so much for that. Where miracles happen every day. Every day. That's what the Welcome House is all about. How many of you are here for the first time at this? Oh, good. We've got a fresh crowd of folks. We're gonna share the Welcome House story with you, and I think you'll be impressed. It's something else as we give men that second chance at life. Fresh starts. Miracles happen every day at the Welcome House, 27th and Troost, and you're going to see and hear why. And we're going to have some fun. So you're going to learn about the Welcome House. We're going to have some fun. We're going to raise some money. Our good friend Tom Watson is here. Tom, good to see you. Thank you again for your support of this event. Fresh from what had to be a thrilling Masters, the par 3 tournament that Wednesday. It was fun for us back here. I don't know about Augusta, but it looked like you were having a good time. So go, old men rule. 6 under, right? And that's your second par 3 championship, and a couple of green jackets, too, to go along with it. We'll throw those in as well. Thank you, Tom, for your support. Tom will be up here in a bit. We're going to have some fun with him and Tom Arnn, our annual auctioneer. So thank you for being here, and I'm going to bring in one of our board members. Dr. Ted Pierce is here. He's from Rolling Hills Presbyterian Church. He's going to give us an invocation, but also mention he's on the board, and his church is a big supporter of what we are doing here today. Ted?
Let's open with a word of prayer. Pray with me. Loving and gracious God, we pause and give thanks for this day of life and opportunity. We give thanks for the friends and colleagues seated around us. We give thanks for the food on this table and for the blessing of health and life. We ask today that you open our hearts and our minds to Ryan's message. And we ask your special blessing on the Welcome House. And dear Lord, we ask a selfish prayer that you send a couple of good drafts our way for our beloved Chiefs. Amen.
Amen. Ted, could you throw in a few base hits and arms for the Royals while you're at it? Yeah, it is baseball season, right? I want to remind you that one of the fun things we're going to do today is our raffle. We've got some great prizes, including an opportunity to play golf with Tom Watson. And here's the beauty. This is another big change. No excuses. You all have your smartphones, so you can still get online, and the URL will pop up here every so often. And you can, until 8:05 is the deadline, you can enter the raffle, pay right from your phone. It's not an app. You just go to your browser and buy a raffle ticket there, or 2 or 3, or however many the Spirit moves you. I want to, if I could, bring up our next guest to visit with you here for a little bit. If you've been here before, you know Jamie's story. Jamie Boyle came to the Welcome House himself. 2 degrees, undergrad, graduate degree, but fighting that disease we call addiction. Proof that there are no boundaries. Race, gender, socioeconomic status, doesn't matter. Jamie came to the Welcome House, was a resident, $10 and a backpack. That's what he had. And Miracles happen every day. And Jamie is one of those. He stayed on, has worked at the Welcome House, started at the bottom, worked his way up. He's now the president and CEO. Please, a warm Welcome House breakfast. Welcome to your leader, Jamie Boyle. Jamie?
Thank you, John. I just can't tell you how amazing the view from up here is. Thank you guys all for filling this room on another beautiful, sunny spring day in Kansas City. I want to start this morning by saying thank you for being here and for your support of Welcome House. I also want to take a few minutes to recognize and say thank you to a few individuals and groups for their hard work, effort, and significant contributions, both for today's event and to the Welcome House in general. I want to thank Grant Baumgartner, our breakfast committee chair for the third year in a row. Roseanne Prather. Grant's done a fantastic job. Roseanne Prather, Mitchell Chalk, and the breakfast committee and volunteers for all of their hard work in creating another first-in-class event. I want to thank our sponsors for their financial and in-kind contributions, Tom Watson, Ryan Leaf, John Holt, and Tom Arnn for their participation and service here today. And I want to thank my staff and team at the Welcome House for their dedication, caring, and compassionate work. You make a real difference in the lives of the men at Welcome House each and every day. I'm honored to work beside you and grateful that you're part of my recovery journey. Finally, I want to thank the board of directors for their leadership, support, and vision, and the opportunity to serve and represent an organization that means so much to me personally and that plays such a vital role in the battle against alcoholism and addiction in Kansas City. You know, as I contemplated my message to you today, even with so many successes, firsts, and accomplishments for Welcome House over the past few years, several images and events kept returning to the forefront of my mind. It was a typical Monday afternoon, and I was in my office working when I was distracted by the sound of emergency sirens. I glanced out my window and watched as an ambulance and police car sped our direction down 27th Street. As it was clear they had passed our facility and they were out of my sight, I breathed a sigh of relief and refocused my attention to my work. That relief would be short-lived, though, and a few minutes later, I was informed that a Welcome House resident had been shot and the situation didn't look good. From Fox 4, Kansas City, witnesses told police they saw the man get into a verbal altercation with the suspect, who then shot the man several times before leaving in an unknown vehicle. Before the shooting, the victim was in another altercation with a different man in the same parking lot. Over the next few hours and then days, the very tragic, but I can't say surprising, details of the event emerged. We learned that earlier that morning, our resident had relapsed, was drinking at work, became noticeably intoxicated, and was immediately fired. He left the premises, but he continued to drink, and he became belligerent, argumentative, and in a very short amount of time, his behaviors, fueled by the satisfaction of his disease, choreographed his death. Earlier in the year, an equally tragic, but again, I can't say surprising, death of a former resident had reminded me just how fortunate I am to be alive and in recovery. From the Kansas City Star, the stabbing occurred at 5:40 p.m. Wednesday in the area of Westport Road and Southwest Trafficway. According to witnesses, the suspect and the victim got into an argument before the stabbing. We would eventually learn that our former resident had spent his final day on earth drinking in the park with the man who would eventually end his life. He would have no more relapses, and there would be no additional opportunities to find recovery and change his life. Those were now gone forever. Then there's the homeless man, another former Welcome House resident that I often see as I head up onto the highway and home to my family in the evenings. He's perched on a 5-gallon bucket, his sign and his belongings strapped to a makeshift cart. Sometimes I can see the labels of the bottles and cans through the white plastic bags. I always see the pain on his face and in his eyes. Now, I know many of you in this room can join me in saying, I've seen these men, I know these men, and maybe even I've been these men. But for the grace of God, there go I. You may also be saying to yourself, why is he sharing these stories? They're uncomfortable. They sound a lot like failure, and they're certainly a bit heavy for a breakfast event. In reality, they're textbook examples of the cunning and baffling nature of alcoholism and addiction. My disease, and the battles we fight daily at Welcome House. The reason for sharing is simple. They're authentic and they're our truth. Men don't end up at the Welcome House by accident. They don't come because they're looking for a little extra adventure in their lives or because everything in their lives is going so well. They come in the end stages of their disease and at a time when their lives are in grave and imminent danger. There are no easy cases, no simple situations, and the stakes are high. We fail more than we succeed. Those are the facts. So is it all worth it? Are all the failures and all the potential loss, pain, and devastation worth the effort and investment? My answer to that is a resounding yes. And more than that, I suggest that it's an investment that can't lose and a proposition that can't fail to win. 47 years ago, a group of men answered those very questions with their effort and investment, and a place called Welcome House was born. A place of compassion, support, responsibility, and accountability, and with a mission that is pure and has only become more relevant over time. Their singular intent was to do what they could to help men whose lives had been devastated and destroyed by alcoholism and addiction. One alcoholic or addict helping another alcoholic or addict. This beautiful, selfless concept based on the 12th step of Alcoholics Anonymous that has now helped so many men to recover and rebuild their lives. Now, I wasn't around back then. I was a fairly new member to the human race. But I'm confident that they dealt with their share of failures too. Yet, 47 years later, and 16,000 men later, here we are. That initial investment having paid dividends that we will never fully understand or be able to accurately quantify. Their investment didn't fail, and neither will yours. Today, the Welcome House Sober Living Recovery Program houses up to 80 men nightly and is operating at capacity. And we served 465 men in 2017. The typical man that finds his way to Welcome House is between 21 and 55 years of age, with no more than a high school education and with an income level significantly below the poverty line. He has no job or money when he arrives and no support system, family, friends, or other. He may not have state identification or a social security card, and he likely does not have health care benefits. But despite all of those facts, and because the only requirement for admission into the Welcome House is the sincere desire to be sober and change your life, most men who apply are accepted. As I alluded earlier, the last few years have been a time of amazing growth and accomplishment at Welcome House, and we have many, many successes to celebrate. With your support at this event, your continued year-round support, and the support of many generous foundations in our community, we have made significant improvements. These began with our own investments in Welcome House and the men entrusted to our care. The most significant advancement is in the very way we care for residents. By implementing our new core recovery program, we've provided residents with a roadmap for early recovery, and we've already begun to see dramatic results in our outcomes across the board. meaning more and more men are successfully completing the program, getting sober and finding recovery and rebuilding their lives. The key driver for this is a continuing care team approach that focuses on each individual's unique needs. This individualized care and case management is provided in a peer-to-peer model by professional and specially trained team, several new to us this year, and with the singular goal of achieving the best possible outcomes for each resident. To launch the model, we invested in technology and implemented a customized electronic health record that not only documents essential information to assess and manage each resident's participation in progress, but also effectively tracks and manages overall program performance. In preparation for this robust program and platform, we strengthened the foundation of our organization, aligning all aspects of our administrative, operational, financial, and governance practices with industry standards and best practices. As one might imagine, sheltering, feeding, transporting, educating, and rehabilitating over 400 men each year requires ongoing enhancements in facilities, transportation, and programming. Your support has also enabled us to make significant facilities improvements, to replace our aging fleet of vehicles, and to add or augment other recovery and rehabilitative components of our program, such as Jumpstart for emergency assistance, the Welcome House University program, and our rehabilitative jobs program. One of the most enjoyable aspects of our growth and development has been in the new and expanded relationships and partnerships in the community. These include our work with First Call for technology and clinical services, and a new collaboration with Nourish KC to provide healthy meals and food services, as well as a culinary training program for our residents. But without question, what we're the most excited about is that our program graduate rates continue to improve, almost tripling over the last few years, and finishing strong in 2017 with a 50% increase. Folks, the future for recovery at Welcome House has never been brighter. Our programmatic improvements and enhancements, in tandem with organizational improvements and accomplishments, are mission and strategy woven together to produce real results. Simply put, we will not fail to win. I want to conclude my message to you today with a passage from AA literature. The reading is from a daily devotional called The Eye Opener, and it goes like this. The dollar is worth about half its value of only a few years ago. Capital gains taxes have depreciated all properties by 25%. Monies invested in stocks and bonds can be swept away between dawn and dark. The sound investment of today can be the white elephant on your hands tomorrow. Your dollars invested in the rehabilitation of human souls are the only investment that can't lose. The dividends are paid whether the project fails or not. This way, you can't fail to win. Now, if you'll direct your attention to the screens, this is Welcome House and the power of recovery.
The last 8 months, I went to 5 different hospitals trying to get sober, trying to find a way to get out of it. But by the time I got back home, I had a bottle in my hand and getting drunk again. At that point, I thought that life was over.
4 years ago, alcohol and drugs cost Craig Burton his job, his family, and even his will to live.
One morning, I woke up and I asked God to either give me help or let me come home.
Craig ended up in a local detox center before finding his way to the Welcome House.
God lifted that obsession. I didn't feel that desperation anymore. I felt like there was hope. I believe that came from the Welcome House.
For nearly 50 years, the Welcome House has helped men battling the disease of addiction. Most men who arrive here have lost everything.
You know, they say everybody has to hit a bottom. Our bottom was pretty low.
No money, no job, no family support system. It's here those battling drug and alcohol dependency find help and support.
You don't have to have anything to come and be a part of the Welcome House program. You don't have to have a job, you don't have to have a support system, you don't have to have anything more than the clothes on your back. All we really require is that you have a sincere desire to change your life, get sober, and find recovery.
And did what they asked me to do, and asked God to get the craving of alcohol out of my system, and before long I didn't ever think about it again.
You're at the place that started my sobriety and my long-term recovery.
The Welcome House helps men achieve sobriety using a compassionate, evidence-based approach and 12-step recovery principles. Other areas of focus include relapse prevention, building healthy relationships, securing and maintaining employment, and achieving financial responsibility.
The Welcome House has kept me clean by participating in the 12-step program, attending the meetings. It's actually taught me how to go to work every day. It's a complete program.
I had tried quitting drinking for 16 years, relapse after relapse, and just couldn't quite grasp it.
Craig Burton hasn't had a drink or drug since he arrived at the Welcome House 4 years ago. Today, Craig attends regular AA meetings and works with his sponsor.
He helped me learn that it wasn't the alcohol that was the problem, it was me that was the problem.
The reason that the Welcome House worked for Craig is because he did get involved. That gave him his start.
The Welcome House continues to expand services through new collaborations. Nourish KC prepares and serves nutritious meals for residents and provides training for careers in the culinary world. The Welcome House Core Recovery Program, with assistance from First Call, helps men set recovery goals, identify and connect with additional resources, and provides continuing support aimed to sustain sobriety and enable productive, meaningful lives.
We've invested in technology, we've invested in additional staffing and folks who are certified to help residents walk through our program and then connect to additional social services and recovery support services in the community.
Before I was sponging off with the city, doing things I wasn't supposed to be doing. Now I'm actually working, giving back to my community, doing community service work. It's like night and day.
For me, it helps a lot having other guys being in this living situation where you're around other people who are encouraging and inspiring.
The demand for services at the Welcome House continues to climb as the opioid crisis grips the nation. So does the cost to maintain the 80-bed facility inside a 100-year-old building. Staff members here continue to focus on the Welcome House mission of helping men achieve sobriety and change their lives.
There's a lot of hope out there for an alcoholic and an addict. It can start at the Welcome House with the roadmap of early recovery.
Since his days at the Welcome House, Craig Burton's life has changed dramatically. Today, he has a full-time job delivering medications and medical supplies to companies and patients.
From where I was to what I'm being trusted with now is just an incredible feeling.
Craig went from living out of his car to buying this home. He also managed to pay off $50,000 in debt, and Craig's relations with his family and friends continue to improve.
There's a lot of angels in that place. When I left, I took some with me. That's where I'm here now. It's a pretty good feeling, by the grace of God. And the Welcome House, and the fellowship of AA. I couldn't have done it without any of them.
Let's give another round of applause to Andy Pollard and Keith King for producing that wonderful video. You know, I get goosebumps, and I've seen it a couple times. Each time I see it, I know Craig. That's an amazing story. And my question to you now is, was that worth the effort and investment? If your answer is yes, or if you've been impacted by alcoholism or drugs in any way, I urge you to show your support of the Welcome House and help us to continue to fight this battle. Make the one investment today that you can, that cannot lose. If the table captains will please pass out the donation envelopes that are inside the manila envelopes on the table, if you haven't already. When you get your envelope, please open it up, take a look at it, and decide how you are going to help the Welcome House continue to save lives. Once you've made your contribution, just simply return the envelope to the manila envelope, and we'll collect them at the end of today's event. Give generously, give what you can, and know that even the smallest gift matters. It is because of the Welcome House that I'm sober today. It worked for me. It can work for any alcoholic or addict, and it's where miracles happen every day. Thank you for being here and for your generous support.
Jamie, thank you. We are lucky to have you at the helm and on the front lines. As Jamie mentioned, we're passing out the envelopes. Give some serious thought. Jamie mentioned the failures that do happen, but boy, the successes, as you just saw, are oh so sweet. So thank you for your support in advance. We're going to let you settle in, enjoy a little breakfast as they continue to serve. We have a terrific keynote speaker today, and we're going to have some fun with our raffle and auction. Thanks again for being here. Enjoy your breakfast. Okay, as we like to say in the TV business, welcome back. Enjoy your breakfast and your fellowship, and I've seen a lot of activity at the table, so that's a good sign that the table captains are getting it done. We promised you a terrific keynote speaker. I want you to, again, cast your eyes on the video screen for a short video before we bring our speaker up.
When you're little, you dream you can do anything. Some dream they want to be a doctor, an astronaut, maybe a cowboy. My dream was to be a professional athlete. So how did I get here?
Here's a throw by Leaf, an open guy. Look at that play.
I remember the day when I decided to go to Washington State. It was the greatest 4 years of my life. I played in the biggest games. I even played in the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl. I was on top of the world. I was meeting my heroes
Ryan Leaf,
on the cover of magazines.
the second choice in the draft, the San Diego
And the second
Chargers.
player picked in the 1998 NFL Draft.
University, Ryan Leaf.
Then one day, I started to lose control.
Backside pressure and goes down hard. Time flings it deep, pass intercepted.
That dream slowly started to slip away.
What about that guy Ryan Leaf from Washington State?
Wow.
Got to be right.
Troubled former quarterback Ryan Leaf has been arrested.
Leaf was accused of burglary and drug activity. In a plea deal, he pled guilty to the charges.
Former NFL quarterback Ryan Leaf was arrested Friday in his Montana hometown.
Ryan Leaf has been arrested for the second time in just 4 days. This is Leaf's latest mugshot.
I'm both humiliated and embarrassed with the situation, not only for myself, especially for my family.
Quarterback Ryan Leaf was sentenced to 10 years of probation.
The strange story of Ryan Leaf has taken another turn
with a plea deal by customs agents.
His career was the epitome of a bust.
Ryan Leaf has been arrested.
Leaf was indicted in May in Canyon, Texas.
What was I supposed to do? Just give up? Today I try to use that nightmare to benefit others. My life's purpose is much clearer when I just work to help. the truth, even when it's hard, sets people free. Change is one of the few constants in life. The question is, are you changing for the better? I'm Ryan Leaf, and I'm just like you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome house. Welcome to Mr. Ryan Leaf.
Let me steal your mic. Is this working? All right. It's pretty dramatic. Huh. I just want to say thank you. I can't believe a room is filled like this. Just over 8 years ago, I didn't even know recovery existed. I didn't. I had blinders onto this and see a room full of 1,000 people for one cause, I think is tremendous. I'm just going to tell you a little story. It's my story. For a lot of you, it sounds exactly the same with maybe some unique qualifiers of sorts, but I'm from a really small town in Montana called Great Falls. I'm the only Montanan ever drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. There are more first-round draft picks in the Manning family than the whole state of Montana ever, okay? So there was some uniqueness, and I thought I was pretty special. I was raised by amazing, amazing parents. I'm not of the belief that you are a product of your environment. If that were true, I would have never ended up in a prison cell, ever. I was raised in a community that was caring and loving. Right around 13 years old, I noticed a significant shift in my behavior. I was better than everybody at what I did. And I was very competitive. And I started getting placed on a pedestal. And I realized that I could act out or behave a certain way because I could make up for it on a baseball diamond or a basketball court or a football field. And I noticed my parents treating me differently because they didn't want their son's behavior to be recognized. So they started kind of hiding some things, and that's where I first really developed the idea that it was what everybody perceived I looked like rather than who I actually was. And from that moment on, I was never Ryan again. I was Ryan the athlete or Ryan the football player, and I was never Ryan. I was not popular. I showed up to parties in high school with a six-pack of 7-Up. I looked at somebody who drank and did drugs as morally corrupt. You know, I was judgmental. I know now that I was a drug addict long before I ever took a drug. My drug was competition. I simply had to win at everything. And if I didn't, we'd have to run it right back, and I would beat you, and in doing so, find a way to humiliate you too. It wasn't the ideal childhood, but there's always that fine edge between like elite athlete and asshole. It's really, really close. I spent a lot of my life just bouncing back and forth till finally I settled on one of them. You can guess which one. I chose to go to Washington State. It was, the best decision of my life. I went to a place where I was like everybody else, where we were the best athletes from our high school, and we were competing at a common goal. Excuse me. And we did something there that hadn't happened since 1931. We won a championship. We got to play in the Rose Bowl and play for the national championship. I was also a Heisman Trophy candidate with Peyton Manning, Charles Woodson, and Randy Moss. 3 Hall of Famers. And me. I know now what's important in life, of course, so I can look back on that night and think of how great it was. How I got to represent my family, my university, I looked at that picture for so long and saw myself as such a failure, rather than seeing for what it was. It was a great accomplishment. I decided to go pro at 21 years old on April 18th, 1998, so just about 20 years ago last week. And they gave that 21-year-old $31 million. For all you parents out there, I would liken it to giving your 13-year-old $31 million. And that is not going to work out well. For whatever reason, I developed this idea that success was money, power, and prestige. I don't know where. My father has taught me as well as he could. My father is a Vietnam veteran, a man who raised 3 boys, has the most character and integrity you can imagine. As you know, as parents, most of you, you can do whatever you can, teach them whatever you need to. Your child's going to make a choice on their own. And I had developed this idea that those were the ideals of success. And I didn't think money would change me, but money changed me. We won our first 2 games as a starter. It hadn't happened since John Elway did it in 1983. And then I came to this fine city of yours. And a lot of that video you saw was from that game. I had the most humiliating performance of my life. And afterwards, it wasn't about how I played, it was how I dealt with it. After the game and what would proceed for the next week. That young kid that you saw who wanted to do this since he was 4 years old, I can look back on it now and say my career was over after 3 games, which is crazy to think, all because of how I dealt with it. The idea that life isn't fair, but it's how you deal with it that matters is so true. That was an opportunity to show my resolve. I saw only things in 2 light, black or white, failure or success. I didn't see it as an opportunity to do it better the next time. I just simply didn't. And then when people were critical of me, I got defensive, just like an addict behaves. I know now that, of course, that was my addict behavior, now that I know how an addict behaves. But I would bounce around for 5 more years. But there was always a problem, no matter what. And of course, now I know it was me. I was the problem. My ability to cope with life and live life on life's terms, it just wasn't there. I was introduced to Vicodin during my playing career through my orthopedic surgeries. I had 15 of them. And every time I was given this drug called hydrocodone or Vicodin, and I took it to remove or alleviate the acute physical pain, and it worked. And then when I was done, I rehabbed and went on and played. I quit this game when I was finally sick and tired of being beat up physically, but mostly emotionally. I walked away from something I wanted to do since I was 4 years old because I wasn't able to cope with it. Also, my pride got in the way because I was being asked to be a backup quarterback. And for me, that wasn't something I did. I was the starting quarterback. I was the star. That's how I perceived things. So I quit. I just walked away. I told people I retired, but who retires at 28 years old? About 3 months after I had quit, I went to Las Vegas, made everybody believe that everything was okay. Even though I was no longer a starting NFL quarterback, the prestige of still being a former one was enough to fit those ideals. And sure enough, we're at the MGM Grand for a fight, and they're announcing celebrities in the audience, and they announce Dr. Dre and Tiger Woods and Charles Barkley, and the whole audience just cheers and claps and applauds. And then they announce my name at ringside, and the whole MGM Grand just booed and hissed. And of course, I've been booed and hissed before. I mean, I was a quarterback. You go into an opposing stadium, that's the way it works. But I was always wearing this armor of sorts, right? These shoulder pads, this helmet. And many a time, it emboldened me to be better and fight more. This time it was about, we think you're an awful person, Ryan. That's how I perceived it. You're just an awful human being. And I was going to have to go in and out of parties the rest of the night where there were Super Bowl champions and Hall of Famers. And when I do that, I always felt less than and judged. And sure enough, the way this works is an acquaintance of mine offered me a couple pills. And I took them. And I mixed them with the alcohol. And for the rest of the night, any of those parties I went into, I didn't feel any of that. None of that judgment, none of that less than. I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel better, but I didn't feel the pain or the emotional pain that was existing there. It worked for me. And that night, alone, and that feeling of not feeling anything would start an 8-year run of just debauchery for me. Of course, early on, it's just you. I lived in this $1 million house overlooking the bluffs in San Diego, but instead I had my drapes drawn, popping pills, watching reruns of The West Wing and Dawson's Creek, and that's what I thought my life was now. And the scariest part was I was like okay with it. I still had to make everybody believe that everything was okay, right? That those ideals still existed. So I would show up to public things every so often. And I would say that if social media existed back then, it would look very similar to what Johnny Manziel's life has looked like the past 2 years, where we think we're showing everybody that everything's okay, but everybody around us or looking from afar can see that it's just like a raging dumpster fire. And that's what it was. But I thought I was okay. I kept everybody at a distance who wanted to confront me, and I surrounded myself with people who said, "It's not your fault, Ryan," and put the blame on others, and who essentially enabled that behavior. Until, of course, when you're making $5 million a year and you decide to quit that job, but still pretend like you're making $5 million a year, that ultimately goes away. And you end up in your hometown where you're supposed to be the hero, but instead living in a small little mother-in-law's house behind another house, waking up every morning thinking about one thing: do I have pills? And if I don't, how do I get them? And that was my day. Started early where doctors would prescribe them, but of course you get found out that way. Till then, ordering them online. It was so cheap that I would always order them COD because I didn't want to get gypped on the actual pills that came in the mail. I wanted to make sure they were real. And normally the post office only gets like 1 or 2 CODs a month. They were getting like 2 or 3 a week from me. So it was easily found out. I would go to a friend's house, pretend I was interested in spending some time with them, go through their medicine cabinets, till ultimately at the end, simply walking into houses on the outskirts of my hometown and looking up open houses in the newspaper and going there pretending I was interested in buying the house. And of course, 9 times out of 10, I'd find pills. And that's the vicious cycle of opiate addiction, all right? It's a psychological hold on you where you see that you're this junkie and you're shamed and guilt-ridden for what you're having to do this. But the only way to get rid of that feeling is to take the pills, because it works. It numbs me. I don't feel anything. I didn't know that there was something like this available to me. Anytime anybody had approached me with anything, I always said, "I'm fine. I got this." It goes back to when I was in the NFL after my rookie year, and a guy named John Carney, our kicker, came to me and was like, "I know it's been a struggle, Ryan. I've seen it happen. I want to help." And he said, "I'm friends with Tony Robbins." I don't know if you guys know who Tony Robbins is. Huge motivational speaker, philanthropist. And he says, he's willing to spend the weekend with you this weekend if you want to come to his private island in Fiji. And we'll work on some self-help things. Is that something you're interested in? And I think my exact words to John Carney that day were, "Fuck Tony Robbins." That's how I dealt with things. I was all-knowing, all-powerful. But if any of you know Tony Robbins now, know that Ryan's up for that weekend in Fiji. Okay? I've learned. So finally, though, as a criminal, I'm not good. The police were alerted. They showed up at my house. They arrested me for the second time in 48 hours. And this time I wouldn't get out. I wouldn't be able to bond out. But just because you go to jail doesn't mean anything changes. I was still the same person that I'd always been. I just was now without that drug that numbed it. So the self-loathing, the anger, the judgment, the narcissism was all just at the forefront, right? I didn't do anything in there. I was in prison for 32 months. 26 of those, I sat on my butt, ate terrible food, watched TV, and got fat, and blamed everybody else. Only went outside twice. There was many nights that I was in that little house in my hometown where I'd walk by the mirror and just beg for help. Just beg for it. Just to the cosmos or to the universe. I still couldn't look somebody in the eye and say, I'm struggling, please help me. I couldn't do it. So finally, my higher power just sent the sheriff's department that night. He said, I've sent many different signs, and this is the one that's going to have to take. And sure enough, while in prison, he did the same thing. He gave me a roommate. Excuse me. He gave me a roommate who was an Afghani and Iraqi war veteran who had done something a lot of us have done probably in our lives, and that's drive drunk. It just so happened the night he did it, he killed somebody. But from the moment I met him in there, he made amends for his action. He was trying to better himself every day, and I looked at him like he was nuts. I was just like, what are you doing, man? We're losers. This is who we are now. He was not resolute in being that person. I certainly was. Finally, one day, he felt comfortable enough to confront me, and he said, Ryan, you got to get your head out of the sand, man. You don't understand the value you have, not only for the men in here, but for when you get out. Because you're going to get out at some point. And he said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go down to the prison library, and we're going to help prisoners who don't know how to read learn how to read. And I've had many of these come to Jesus moments, right? From coaches, mentors, friends, and I literally just gave them all the bird. For whatever reason, I went. But I can see myself now walking down that prison hallway in my red jumpsuit, just kind of kicking metaphorical rocks like a child, going, this is stupid. Doesn't he know how important I am? And you're not. You're in a prison, Ryan. Right? Well, I went. And I went back the next day, and I went back the next day. And before I knew it, I realized I was being of service to another human being for the first time in my life. I always thought that my athletic ability or what I did on a Sunday or a Saturday was my service. I thought I was better than you because I played this silly sport. I never really looked at myself in the eye and said, Ryan, you were just a flawed human being like everybody else trying to be better. That's who I am. Sometimes we forget that pedestal grows and I lift myself up even higher. I liken it to going to the gym, right? You don't go to the gym and the next day you walk out and you look like The Rock. It's about consistency, it's about showing up. And before I knew it, it was a month, 2 months, and now I was the TA for the substance abuse counselor. And I knew it was going to have to be the foundation for when I get out. And when I walked out of that prison, December 3rd, 2014. Not like this was like 10 years ago, people. Like, this was 3.5 years ago. The change in my life has been so dramatic, I couldn't have ever imagined it being possible. I walked out of that prison that day to the only two people who never gave up on me, my mom and dad, with no idea what was going to happen. I just had this hope, and that was validated by the service work while I was in there. The only reason why I had any hope. I know that's the reason. But I had nothing. I couldn't rub 2 pennies together. I was about to go live on mom and dad's couch in the basement at 38 years old. No prospects, no job. Credit score like 500. Girls weren't lined up around the corner to date me. But I had hope. I don't know where I found it. I do now, of course. I went and sought treatment because I knew, even though I stayed sober in prison, that I wasn't sober. I needed to work on my mental health, my physical health, and that's what I did. While there, I reached out to a company called Transcend Recovery Community, who works in this field, has sober living environments all over the U.S., and I asked for a job. And I remember he walked in and said, "You'll be a driver at one of the houses, and you'll be a manager at one of the houses to be a support to new people in recovery, and we're going to start you out at $15 an hour." And I don't remember doing this, but he said I gave him the biggest bear hug you can imagine. Because the idea that I was making $5 million a year and was miserable, and now just being offered a job for $15 an hour, I felt more value than I ever could imagine. And I knew that those ideals that I thought were success were going to have to be just flipped on their head, right? And that's where I started. The epitome of what service work is. And what it's blossomed into is this, standing in front of a room of 1,000 people telling you my story in the hopes that it will reach one individual. And knowing that this has nothing to do with me, but every single one of you in here, whether you've had dealings with recovery or not, has a story. Your story is just as important as mine because we're humans. And there's always ups and downs, no matter what. I don't like to minimize my story at all or the impact of it, but it was just life. Mine was just very public. Everybody saw it. And it probably saved my life because there's many of our friends and peers who are going through what we went through, but they're doing it in the shadows, and we don't see it. Every time I messed up, I was shown that mirror by all the broadcasters to all the fans. I'm so grateful that I spent 32 months in prison. I never thought I'd be able to say that. I don't recommend it, but I'm very, very grateful for it because it's given me this life. I'll end on these 2 things. Those ideals that I thought were success, of course, I said were replaced. And if you can institute these in your lives in any way, I guarantee you good things will happen. If I do the next right thing, like great things happen for me, not just good things. That's not lost on me because I know if I don't, it goes great and amazingly awful the other way, right? I go to prison. My best thinking takes me to a prison cell. It's not like you walk in there on a winning streak. Number 1 is accountability. I was never accountable to anybody or anything my whole life. That moment when I finally could walk by the mirror and look at myself in the mirror in prison and say, "Ryan, you're here because of what you did. Nobody else." Because I blame the Chargers, I blame the NFL, I blame the doctors, I blame my parents, my hometown, everybody. Accountability is the main contributor in who I am today because I still mess up, right? I have a 6-month-old, so I mess up a lot now. Number 2 is spirituality. There was a joke in college that Sports Illustrated ran that said, "What's the difference between God and Ryan Leaf?" And the punchline is that God doesn't think he's Ryan Leaf. If you can walk into a stadium of 100,000 people and go like this, that is godlike in your eyes. And for whatever reason, I thought I was better than everybody because of it. I'm spiritual, the meditation, the prayer part, but also understand that there's something so much greater than me out there. I'm not necessarily religious. I'll pick and choose from every religion. Sometimes it's in a reading. I do know this, that there is a God and I'm not it, period. That works. And the third thing is community, okay? When I played, I isolated myself in a way where I thought I was better than everybody, to the fullest. To when I was using, completely the opposite way, right? But isolated. The crazy thing about this disease is that it tells you the antidote or the answer is isolation. And that's where you run to. There's 2,500 meetings a week in Los Angeles where I live. The recovery community is amazing. And then I get to do this. I travel the country, and my community gets larger and larger and larger. And I put myself right in the middle of it. I'm not going to get picked off. It's funny, when you become personable and likable, people want to hang around you. And you meet interesting and great people because of it. And it's given me this life. Not because of anything I've done, but everything that everybody else has helped me with. I was at Oregon this last weekend calling a game for the Ducks. Marcus Mariota had his Heisman Trophy there. And surrounded it was every name of his teammates from his season. Then it went down one. Every teammate of his from high school. Then it went down one more rung. Every teammate of his from Pop Warner. I had a friend of mine tell me the other day that, Ryan, there are a lot of people here because of you. And I simply looked him in the eye and I said, well, I'm here because of a lot of people, you included. So thank you all very, very much for having me.
Thank you, Ryan.
Just real quick, Ryan. You folks probably don't know this, but Ryan came in early yesterday and came down to the Welcome House, took a tour, got to see our program, and spent some time with us sharing his experience and learning about our program. And I can't thank you enough, Ryan, for being here today, for your message, and for taking the time to do that. So please accept this as a gift of our appreciation. And if it's too heavy for your suitcase, I'll mail it to you.
What a terrific message, Ryan. Thank you so much. Congrats on that new baby. And by the way, for the record, I go to the gym, and I'll never look like rock. So I'm going to bring up Rich McCardle now. Rich is our chairman of the board. You know, we talk about miracles happening every day. And we have some miracle honorees we want to thank today. So, Rich, take it away, my friend.
Good morning. I'm Rich McCardle, and I am a grateful alcoholic. And it certainly takes a village, and this is in place here this morning. You know, Ryan, thank you so much. That was very inspiring, outstanding message. You know, I feel like Richie Pettibone. A few of you might remember Richie Pettibone. He was the head coach for the Washington Redskins, but he had the situation where he followed Joe Gibbs as the coach of the Washington Redskins. And Richie went 4-12 and was summarily fired after 1 year. So I'm following Ryan Leaf. I hope I don't get fired. One of the reasons that we're so successful certainly are the efforts that you make and the support that you give us at the Welcome House. And an award that we give to individuals that are instrumental in passing along the message and the mission is the Miracle Award. So this year we have two individuals, Mike Helmuth and Dale Irwin, that will receive our Miracle Award. First, I wanted to invite Dale Irwin is not here. In fact, he is down presenting a case to the Missouri Supreme Court this morning. Now, it's not that case, right? Yet. But he wishes he was here, and on behalf of Dale, his beautiful wife Terry will be accepting the award. And also Mike Helmuth. Mike Helmuth has been not only a board member with the Welcome House, but for me personally has been quite an inspiration in my road to recovery. So Dale has been with the Welcome House for over 32 years. He's been a lay counselor and has heard just about every story imaginable. And one of the things he shared with us is the fact that so many of the residents that come in are unsure where they're going to go. And oftentimes, and what he's labeled as the yeah buts, the yeah buts residents of the Welcome House. They always have an excuse, they always know the answer, and yet they're not doing some of the fundamental things to get sober and clean and become a productive member of society. So Dale has been an instrumental part of what we do from a volunteer standpoint. 32 years, he's seen a lot, he's heard a lot, and yet he's continued to be an incredibly loyal and passionate volunteer for us down at the Welcome House. And for that, we want to recognize Dale Irwin. And Terry, if you'll come up.
Good morning. I am Dale's wife, Terry Irwin, and it is a very honor. I feel it's an extreme honor to receive this award for him today. And I just have a little message to read. I have the unenviable task of channeling Dale for you today. Those of you who know him will know that's funny. He is down in Jefferson City at the Missouri Supreme Court trying to help out a woman who was sued $7,000 on a $300 loan she took out from a payday lender. If he were here, he would tell you that the most satisfying things one can do is to try to be of service to others, particularly the less fortunate among us. Trying to help alcoholics regain their footing falls into that category. But he would be first to tell you, in all humility, that he has gotten far more out of going to Welcome House on Thursday evenings than he has put in it. He often mentions the story of an AA chapter that gave an annual award for humility. The catch was, if whoever got it showed up to accept it, it was immediately, for that fact, taken away. Not wanting to lose this one, he sent me to accept it.
Our next honoree recipient of the Miracle Award is Mike Helmuth. As I mentioned, I've had the very good pleasure of getting to know Mike on a personal level, and he certainly is a guy that walks the walk. And one of the things that Mike shared with us with regard to his involvement at the Welcome House gets down to some of the basic tenets of recovery, and that is alcoholics helping alcoholics. And the fact that Mike recognizes the fact that the Welcome House is a place for second chances. And that's so true. And we heard Ryan, all the trials and tribulations that he went through. And it sounds like he got more than a second chance, right? And he found the gift of recovery, and he's sharing that with us today. On Michael's end, he's been involved with the Welcome House for over a decade. As I mentioned, he was an instrumental part of what we were putting together a number of years ago as a board member, and he continues to support us in everything that we do, not only financially, but certainly passing the message along with all the folks that he encounters on a daily basis. So Mike, please come up and please welcome and congratulate Mike Helmuth on the Miracle Award.
Well,
it's very nice to be recognized. There are a lot of people that have done a lot for the Welcome House well before us today. So I can't imagine what it was like to get it started, but it's everybody's job in this room to make sure it's there tomorrow. So dust off your wallets. We're going to ask you for money.
This is unscripted. John doesn't know what's coming, but John, I can't tell you what you've meant to this event over the years. Your professionalism, your energy, it's just been fantastic. You make us all look good. We want you to accept this gift as our appreciation to you for 5 years, guys, of doing this for the Welcome House. So thank you.
Well, I wasn't expecting that, so I didn't plan a speech. You're lucky. Party pick, okay. Party pick. Thank you. Thank you, Jamie, and thank you to all for that. That's very kind of you. You always serve good coffee, and that gets this late night guy up and going in the morning, so I appreciate that.